We'll go ahead and get started. If everyone could please take their seats. What an exciting 3 days this has been. It's so amazing to see all of you out in the audience. It's hard to believe that this is the closing plenary. My name is Emily Williams. I'm the Associate Director at the Social Justice Initiative. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge a few people. On behalf of Barbara Ransby and the Social Justice Initiative, we would like to acknowledge the Institute for Research on Race and Public Policy, the Great Cities Institute, the Jane Addams Hull House, and the other UIC units who supported the conference. As well, I would like to acknowledge our community partners, the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership at Kalamazoo College, the Bertha Social Justice Institute at the Center for Constitutional Rights, the Black Youth Project and BYP 100, the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture at the University of Chicago, Chicago Public Radio, the Department of African American Studies at Northwestern, Freedom University, the Mansfield Institute for Social Justice and Transformation at Roosevelt University, 1DC, Project NIA, Project South, the Public Square, and Students Against Mass Incarceration. A big thank you goes to Rachel Kydor and our volunteers. I also want to mention the Freedom Dreams Youth Track that took place over the last 3 days. Several community organizations, activists, and volunteers contributed meaningful and exciting workshops for young people to participate in. Last but not least, much gratitude goes to the Social Justice Initiative team. So please stand when I call your name. Charlotte Jackson, Bree McFadden, Yvonne Arenas, Alice Kim, Lillian, Marco Rock, Asia Reynolds, Martine, Ashley Tolliver, Daisy Zamora, Ann Meredith Wooten, Skyla Hearn, Dina Lewis, Isis Ferguson, Prudence Brown, Jason Perez, Jennifer Ash, and of course, to Barbara, our fearless leader. Who we all love and respect very much, and without your vision, hard work, and intellect, this conference would not have happened. Ultimately, freedom dreaming does not mean standing at the forefront and leading from the podium, but rather empowering others to come together and work together to make a common future. Barbara is that kind of leader, and we have all grown from and learned with her. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing us all together and for pushing us to make other futures today. Okay, and I have a few announcements before we get started. In your program, there was a flyer about the Ella Baker Institute. The Institute will be here at UIC from July 11th through the 16th. It is co-hosted by the Social Justice Initiative and Ella's Daughters. There's limited space for participants. Please email the Social Justice Initiative for application information. Also, this time next year, we will host Bandung and Beyond to commemorate the anniversary of the Bandung Conference. So please look for more information about that conference. Also, the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership at Kalamazoo College will be hosting With or Without Borders from September 25th through September 28th. And then one piece of logistical information is that there will be shuttles to the Silver Room and to the Jazz Showcase, leaving from Wolcott at about 8:30. So I'm excited that we have 3 Chicago-based poets performing today. The first will be Jasmine Barber from Young Chicago Authors.
I never knew how much my voice didn't matter, but how much my skin did until I went to school in Ohio. My words don't matter here. They are not taken seriously. The only thing they are taking seriously is how to keep my knees intact. Can I bring them another championship title? How many free throws can I hit without a water break? Can you hit the Dougie? My teammate asked me, ooh, can you twerk? Another girl asked me. I am tired of only communicating through my body movements. I am tired of trying to get my point across your way. These white kids look at my mouth like a circus. How my speech flips, balances ebonics and proper English on a linguistic tightrope between pearly whites. I say thinner, car, talking about. They look at me like, what are you talking about? How smack lips sound like whiplash, and all of a sudden I have all of my white peers' attention. I'm not allowed to get angry here. There's a fire in my throat, and if I don't think fast enough, someone's going to end up with 3rd degree and charred skin. So when homegirl or another comment towards my hair leaves their mouth, I clench teeth. Admit my lips to be pursed, admit my tears to become steam. Smoke leaves my nose, barbecue insults on the roof of my mouth before I end up out of this mother, or worse. My roommates and I are only 2 of the 8 black people in our entire building. We blast hip hop, got the whole building hopping, our hips moving on beat. We beatbox, do box braids, laugh and cry about how boxed in we feel each other. We hold dorm room black confessionals, we hold each other. Our voice is found in the music. We turn it up, we turn up. When we dance, we are dancing for ourselves, not for the amusement of others. I found happiness in my dorm room confessional. I release a laugh that has been in prison all semester. I dance. I transform into an uprooted sunflower, stomping the sadness into our $5 rug. Who knew how much salvation you could find in the iTunes in a set of $20 speakers? The music is helping us speak. The beat is drowning out the white privilege. White girl next door knocks on our sanctum, wants me to turn that noise down. I want to bring my fist on her face for calling hip-hop noise. Do you think what I have to say is noise? I roll my neck just to keep me from snapping hers.
And next up we have Sage Morgan Hubbard.
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me, Lord, over me. I woke up this morning with my mind on freedom. When I was a child, I would get in trouble for daydreaming. People used to make fun of me for being too optimistic, too energetic, too out to change the world. You peace and love girl, you're too nice. Why don't you yell at your students? By college, I got teased for being too angry and emotional. Why are you so upset all the damn time? The youth that I taught on the south and west side said all they wanted to do this summer is stay alive, to survive, to not wake up dead. Freedom Summer taught us that all summers should be free. All summers are times for learning, including this one. In the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center, many of my students couldn't answer the question of where they felt safe. Others said they felt the safest in jail, not because they were happy, but because for the first time they had access to 3 meals a day, health care, and a few educators who cared. 50 years later, and we still got a lot of work to do. This is not what we dreamed quite yet. You're too feminist. You're too concerned about race and all that stuff that should just stay in the past. You're too queer. Damn, girl, just stop worrying. It ain't your problem. It's okay. Calm down. Worse yet is what I told myself, that I wasn't enough. Not white enough, not black enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't political enough. I don't deserve to be here. I haven't done enough, till the enoughs and shoulds almost killed me. How can I be a freedom fighter if I've never been in jail? If I didn't live through the Holocaust and Jim Crow and sharecropping like my grandma's? If I don't have my PhD? If I wasn't raised in the 60s, how could my voice ever be valid? If I'm this light, this privileged, this, free yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Now, I'm growing into myself. And I recognize how very important and necessary all these feelings are. I still don't feel free. Many days I feel stuck in school debt and guilt and anger and sadness. Freedom is a lifelong process. The late, great Mama Maya Angelou said that being free is difficult and perpetual. Fighting for one's freedom, struggling towards being free is like struggling to be a poet or a good Christian or a Jew, Muslim, or Zen Buddhist. You work all day long and achieve some kind of level of success. By nightfall, you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning with a job still to be done. So you start all over again. Being free is being able to accept people for what they are. You're only free when you realize you belong no place. And you belong every place. You encounter many defeats, but you must never be defeated, ever. In fact, it is necessary to confront defeat to get over it, all the way through it and go on, laugh a lot, and love life. When I feel the most free is when I play with ideas and children. When I laugh and smile and cry, I know I am nothing without my dreams, nothing without my feelings, nothing without my communities. You can lock me up, but not my head and heart. Let us not stop being ourselves. In order to become agents of social change, we need not to be what they see on TV, not cling to subscribed and overly meditated notions of cool, but rather each work on ourselves with each other. I grew, and am growing because I found people like Dr. Angela Davis and Dr. Robin D.G. Kelley to help unlock these ideas that were already bursting inside of me, but I had no language or space to live in. Another world is possible. Despite the hegemony of forces that promote inequality, hierarchy, possessive individualism, and contempt for humanity. A surreal, real world where we dream and envision together what we want, what we desire, more than what systems we want to dismantle and struggle against. We are planting possibilities, birthing hope, and this ain't some hippie shit. We are far too political, far too dreamy to be hippie. We are people of hips and backbones and labor pains, of thighs and vulvas. We birth revolutions from our imaginations. We are transforming worlds with radical social change. This is an everyday making of new worlds not yet born. Freedom ain't free. Freedom is work. It is labor. It can also be art and pleasure. Dr. Kelley breaks it down. Freedom and love may be the most revolutionary ideas available to us. Yet as intellectuals, we have failed miserably to grapple with their political and analytical importance. Let us not be afraid to dream, to be ourselves fully with big bellies and big ideas, funk and nerdiness, and all our dreams and actions are deeply interconnected via race, gender, sexuality, culture, class, spirituality, shifting what is and what was into what might be and what will ain't. We will be teased and tormented and tortured and terrified at times. However, as Dr. Davis notes, our victories are attained by freedom movements never etched in stone. We are required to continually reconfigure. Our challenge today is to secure bridges and link anti-racist movements, prison abolitionist campaigns, and immigrant rights movements. We will not discard any peoples, particularly those most disenfranchised among us. We will be public and political, all the while catering to our most intimate, personal, harvesting our dreams and vulnerabilities. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to the same songs that are being sung, same records spin. And I don't know about y'all, but I am awake and still dreaming. Dr. Kelly knows that it is precisely these alternative visions and dreams that inspire new generations to continue to struggle with change. My belly be full of dreams. I want to hear all of your dreams. What are the new knowledges, theories, and questions? This conference and these 50 years of reflection and the 50 years to come are here to resolve the contradictions between everyday life and our wildest dreams. We be about our dreams budding into action. Doctors Kelly and Davis know, they speak, they work, they live, they dream, and they show. We all see struggles and pain and suffering. We be ignited by them, yet this revolutionary movement is also liberation that is fueled by love and passion, not just stress and force. This freedom be like water, like trust, like fresh air, like this belly, this boy, this future song, and this dream of these lives we have been touched by and learned with over the past 3 days. 50 years is just a start, and we be breaking down walls and breaking open imaginations. No one will be discarded, dehumanized, or destroyed no more. We are not categories, we are people, fully embodied, contradictory people, and to try to hide or claim otherwise slows our flow. It blocks the systems and lets them win. We ain't gonna let nobody turn us round, turn us round, turn us round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us round. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, dreaming of freedom lands. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. No, please. This is for Dominique Franklin, a homie of mine that I grew up with who was tased by the police a couple weeks ago and died last week because he was tased twice. This is for you. It begins with 2 quotes that I saw from the Chicago Tribune article that was written about his tasing. Guess this is what you take. Guess this is the risk you take when you shoplift, resist arrest, attempt to escape, and have outstanding warrants, have a multiple-page criminal record. The chance of death kind of goes with the criminal job description. First comment. See, we were trained to yell taser 3 times so the offender has a chance to stop. He obviously didn't, and this is what he got. You dug your grave, now you have to lay in it. Pun intended. When you don't do stupid stuff like this, then it won't happen to you. Second comment, assumed police officer. The first time I met you, folks warned me about the sledgehammers you carried on your wrists. I made note to not to ever get into a hand throwing contest with you. I was 17, bony, all enamel with no bite, trying to prove to Chicago that me doing 25 push-ups every morning meant I was strong enough to stand in front of McDonald's, elbows cocked and fists ready to meet the face of any victim our young squad chose. Our squad. We were boys in the hood, menaces to society, Machiavelli and ready to die in our headphones. We were soccer players, skateboarders, and people who used bike lanes. We stole bikes and skateboards. We were good grades sometimes and free Huey tattoos on our shoulders. We were Whitney Young, De La Salle, and double honor Lincoln Park students. We were smart enough to know how to lie to our parents, to read textbooks written by white men, but still South Side and West Side enough to know the police didn't give a shit about where you went to school. When we did go to school, folks said you weren't the one to fuck with. But you let me hit the blunt twice. We were teenagers. We stole candy from 7-Eleven. We were broke unless we came up when someone lost their wallet in our pocket. Weed is expensive. And if you ain't got 5 on it, or 2, or at least a lighter, you were left hoping secondhand shook you. You showed me what my juvenile hormonal 25 push-up doing body knew as love. You showed love. You were love. First time I heard you were tased by the police, the last thing I was surprised. I was furious, was confused. News say you hit your head on a light pole after being tased. That's what put you in a coma. The ambulance report say you died on the spot. The nurse say you were tased twice, once in the back of the head after being tased the first time because the first one didn't stop you, though you were already handcuffed. The comments on the Tribune say you deserve it. Say criminals dig their own grave. I am 21 and no police lie. Know how falsified documents appear like magic. No, magic is the only thing that could have saved you that night. I am confused. What the fuck is a criminal? A person who terrorizes people on a daily? A person who pledges allegiance to his gang? A person who brutally murders people? Police always match this description. You weren't an honor student. I won't pretend you were an honor student, an upstanding citizen. You were stealing alcohol when you got tased. You can't win any medals for the track record you have. You've hurt people, but you didn't dig your own grave. You were born into it. If the chance of death goes with this criminal description, our skin has been born with this kind of career. This isn't a poem to state your life as a saint, but to say no authority should be given to have your life taken by the state, my homie. No matter what kind of life you lived, you deserve to live it. The age of Jim Crow has only gotten older. Since Nas taught us sleep was the cousin of death, we've been forced to resist arrest. The only warranty we've been given is the warrant that we carry for our lifetimes. The police hurt people. The state hurt people. We are hurting. We are mourning your loss. Every morning, your father is pouring out over his son, setting because he couldn't make you invincible. But your dreams are. You wanted to start a clothing line, but we were already in this design. In your memory, I will wear out the stitching we never asked for this system until it is no more, no more.
Thank you to our poets. That was very moving and inspiring. London, Hubbard, and then also Jasmine Barber from Young Chicago Authors. Thank you. Now I am honored to introduce Angela Davis. Okay. I am equally privileged to introduce Robin D.G. Kelley. By bringing Black radical history to the fore, Robin Kelley's work reminds us that the Black radical tradition is long and diverse. Spanning multiple Black movements such as those for reparations, gender justice, and third world liberation, his book, Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination, inspired the title for this conference. And then I'll say one quote, and then we'll welcome up Robin Kelley. Struggle is par for the course when our dreams go into action. But unless we have the space to imagine and a vision of what it means to fully realize our humanity, all the protests and demonstrations in the world won't bring about our liberation. Please join me in welcoming Robin D.G. Kelley.
Okay, let's see. Thank you, Emily. Okay, I have to say I'm a little bit. I was really moved by Malcolm's poem. You know, it was, and I was just I just had a little bit of tears and stuff because, you know, there's so many victims. There's so many, you know, and the fact that the Malcolm X grassroots movement has this study, it's like every, 28 hours basically, it's probably more than that. And so many young people. And as Gina Dent said today, and it was a wonderful session on Neoliberal University, like she meets so many young people, young Black men who actually were in college, in prison, who ended up leaving or could be in college or read a lot more than many of us. Anyway, so let me get to the business at hand because time is short. Before I do anything and say all my thank yous, I want to make a plug for the Roots and Remedies conference that's coming up. If you're interested in any of the issues that we are attending to in this conference, you want to register for Roots and Remedies in Detroit this year, July 18th through 20th. You can register, go to rootsandremedies.org. It's my sister's conference, praxisproject.org. My sister is a genius. If you don't know praxisproject.org, look it up, but you need to be there. I will try to be there myself so I could see you again. I also want to dedicate my remarks to the memory of many of those we lost recently. There's too many to name, but I think about what it meant to lose Chokwe Lumumba, what it meant to lose Amiri Baraka, to lose Jane Cortez, which has been over a year, but she's someone who was dear to my heart, Stuart Hall, Vincent Harding. I know Rachel Harding is here. Vincent was a mentor and a brilliant historian and just so many things. Rod Bush, whose memorial I'll be hosting next Sunday. Maya Angelou, of course, and General Baker, to name a few. I also want to honor those who are still with us. I mean, I think about Marion Kramer, who was General Baker's partner for almost 4 decades, longtime Detroit activist, a militant warrior on behalf of the dispossessed. And Grace Lee Boggs, who's still with us, whose birthday is coming up next month. Veterans like Dottie Zellner and Charlie Cobb and Julian Bond and many others, of course, who are here. And of course, Angela Davis, who I'm going to be talking about, whose work is, to me, the best example of what Gramsci actually meant when he talked about an organic intellectual. Because the organic intellectual means basically to develop modes of thought in the service of revolution and to be connected to movements for revolution. That is essentially the definition. And she's like my hero. So I get to, this is the third time we've been in dialogue, and so I'm very excited about this. Now, right, the last 3 weeks. We've been on the road here, twice in LA. Okay, so of course, those of you who read Freedom Dreams know that all of the folks I mentioned who have passed on, the folks who are with us, and the movements with which they were associated profoundly shaped the book's ideas and the content. But for the purposes of this gathering, I just want to just get us to think about General Baker and Angela, because they occupy a unique place. Why do I say that? Because for the first time I ever heard General Baker was 16 years ago, next month, at the founding convention of the Black Radical Congress. That was 16 years ago. I mean, this brings me back full circle to my main debt of gratitude and to the historical significance of this conference, of Freedom Dreams, Freedom Now. And that brings me to Barbara Ransby. You have to realize something, and Barbara's not going to tell you this, but I'll say it, that there would be no Black Radical Congress if it hadn't been for Barbara Ransby, you know? And I know, because I was there. I was part of Ida Webb in those initial meetings. She did more than anyone to envision, promote, and usher in the Black Radical Congress. She needs to take credit for that, like all the credit, basically, and she hasn't been given her due. And I want to acknowledge that, and the reason why I want to acknowledge it now is because I see this conference as the extension of the Black Radical Congress. Okay, some of you are too young to know about that. It's amazing to think about that. I mean, I wasn't even young, back in those days in 1998. So, in some ways, it is the BRC, like this conference, is one that really reflected on the political realities, the crisis, and the possibilities of the day. And it makes sense that Barbara and her students, the students involved in the Social Justice Initiative, would be behind it. Because she has long been one of the premier radical thinkers and activists of my generation. And I mean, it was evident, anyone who knew her even as an undergraduate knew that was the case, okay? So I'm honored and humbled to have, the Freedom Dreams as one of the frames for our 3-day discussion. And I see this as an opening created by the BRC, which could not have come into being without the radical organizing of the 80s and 90s. And yes, there was a lot of organizing in the 80s and 90s. That's another discussion, which couldn't have happened without the Black Freedom Movement of the post-war era, which could not have existed without the Black radical tradition. And let me hasten to add that none of these movements, initiatives, formations have limited their scope or vision to Black people, okay? Rather, they've been capacious and open, building solidarity with oppressed across the globe. So thank you, Barbara, for this. Now, I want to, with the time I have, address what I fear might be a misreading of my book, Freedom Dreams. And just to prepare you, because, and this is my job. My job is to be hard, to think hard. My job's not to entertain you. If you want entertainment, you could, pay some money and go someplace for that. But this is about thinking. So by Freedom Dreams, I didn't mean taking a break from the day-to-day self-defense to dream of a different world, that a radical imagination is literally a kind of dream state. But rather, I meant that we cannot divorce critical analysis from social movements. Social movements, the challenges of solidarity, a deep understanding of mechanisms of oppression, and requirements for new modes of analysis. Okay? So it's not enough to imagine a world without oppression, which I really do want us to do, especially since we don't always recognize the variety of forms of modes of oppression that occur. I mean, this is part of the problem. You can't imagine a world without oppression unless you know all forms of oppression. And part of the education is learning what other forms of oppression that we can't see. But understanding the mechanisms or processes that not only reproduce structural inequality, but make them common sense, that render these processes natural or invisible. In other words, if anything, Freedom Dreams was a plea for what Mark Anthony Neal yesterday referred to as deep thought, as well as a kind of political archaeology of 20th century black radical movements and black radical visions of transformation. It's about how people in transformative social movements moved their ideas, shifted their ideas, rethought inherited categories, tried to locate and overturn blatant, subtle, and invisible modes of domination. Okay, let me slow down because I just realized, sorry about that, if you forgive me, because I want to make sure the translation comes across. Of course, there are too many examples of work that unveil these processes, it interrogates these categories. Categories we continue to take for granted, like human. Like people say, you know, it's because you're human. Well, what does that mean? Race, power, gender, sex, security, law, crime, leadership, and even freedom. I have a list of names of people who I think do great work of interrogating that, but I don't want to name them because then I realize there are other people I should name and they'll be mad at me. So, but it's a long list and just really great work of people who do this. Okay, I'll give you a list, but if I don't name you, don't be mad at me, okay? But I begin with Angela Davis and Cedric Robinson and Beth Ritchie and Abu Nima and Silva and Erica Edwards and Ruth Wilson Gilmore and Fred Moten and Roderick Ferguson and Asfana Najmabani, Jemima Pierre, Naomi Chandler, James Ford, a young cat in Occidental who you're going to hear a lot about, Shandan Reddy, Mishana Goldman, Sarah Ahmed, Jody Bird, and many, many more. In thinking about the need to rethink categories, I wanted to return to yesterday's discussion about pleasure and expressive cultures. If you weren't here, you'll follow me, but it was in a panel on culture. And the conversation was sort of like deja vu because a lot of those debates about what is pleasure, what is joy, we were having those in the 80s and 90s when cultural studies was taking off, and thanks to the influence of people like Stuart Hall and reading Antonio Gramsci. Let's see, I hope I didn't. The discussion yesterday kind of took a bipolar cast. On the one hand, it was presumed that the hegemony of capitalism is complete, it's totalizing. Like all the pleasures and all the desires are determined by the market. On the other hand, there's an opposition to that. That is that the oppressed are in a constant state of resistance, that expressive cultures are inherently, or worse, naturally oppositional. Now, the former underestimates our ability to think and overestimates the capacity of this abstract thing we call power to exercise its hegemony over us. So, as Stuart Hall famously said, hegemony is hard work. It's constant work to try to succeed at basically imposing domination. So we should not be surprised that expressive cultures have constructed an enforced hegemony by naturalizing ideas about nation, about class, about gender, sexuality, race, and ethnicity. I mean, even before the advent of neoliberalism, the world's population had been transformed into producers and consumers of objects, made and disseminated for the benefit of others. The culture industry operates precisely to isolate individuals from each other, to destroy agency and community, to quarantine opposition, as well as deny fundamental change. And most importantly, to mask processes of neoliberalism behind the glossy facades. And I made this argument, I wrote this article you might have seen over the summer called Empire State of Mind, which kind of went viral and people got all upset because why are you talking about Jay-Z? Why are you talking about, well, anyway. But that process, that article was about the way that these processes get masked. But even consumers of expressive culture don't always go for the okie doke, as Baraka would say. We know they can subvert the meaning and significance of political cultural forms for their own purposes. Now, the other position, that is, that popular culture is inherently oppositional. And I remember a young brother had said something that he thought that hip hop is naturally revolutionary, and Dream Hampton's like, no, it's not. And I just thought that was a really important intervention on the part of Dream Hampton, because this position that popular culture is always oppositional not only underestimates hegemony, but it also underestimates our capacity to think in complex ways. It presumes that all thought and creativity and invention is structured by the conditions of oppression. Like, why give oppression that much power over us, right? And it's obsessed with resisting domination, and it's also ahistorical. I think this is what Dream Hampton and Mark Anthony Neal and Tony Bogues, in a different way, were trying to get at yesterday. What may be oppositional in one context may not be oppositional in another. What might be a source of collective pleasure may never have been intended to be oppositional, but if the state decides that whatever that thing is dangerous, that it's deviant, say like the Zoot Suit in the 1940s, it becomes a site of contestation. What happens at that site is not predetermined, nor is it inevitable. And again, then this brings us back to the need for deep thought. We need to interrogate the terms and categories we use. For example, pleasure and joy were used interchangeably. And I was reminded of Gina Dent's path-breaking introduction to the text Black Popular Culture, which we need to go back to always, where she elaborates on Cornel West's distinction between pleasure and joy, where the former, pleasure, according to West, in a commodified world, tends to be inward and highly individuated, that's his words, where the latter can cut through market values and emphasize love, care, kindness, service, solidarity, the struggle for justice. In other words, as Cornell says, values that bring people together. And perhaps this is what Tony Bogues had in mind when he invoked what I believe was C.L.R. James's formulation of happiness. Though I wish, we heard more, because in our neoliberal era, Black happiness sometimes gets articulated as personal wealth, bling, good life, and all that stuff. That's not what Tony was talking about. Read C.L.R. James and you'll know what he's talking about. Read Tony Bogues and you'll know what he's talking about. But Gina Dent raises this distinction to a much higher level in ways I don't have time to explore, but hope you will go back to that essay. So among other things, Gina Dent takes the concept of joy as an elaboration and revision of the rebellious notion of women's pleasure coming from feminism and psychoanalysis. But placing this sort of rebellious notion in the context of Black movement. So she writes, like pleasure, joy still speaks, though not exclusively, to the locus of sensation and activity around which so much contemporary Black anxiety is produced, the erotic. But I refer to the erotic here not in its most general colloquial sense, but in the way that Audre Lorde has defined it, as our deepest knowledge, a power that, unlike other spheres of power, we all have access to, and that can lessen the threat of our individual difference, okay? So in the context of the constant policing of Black women's bodies, Black queer bodies, the pursuit of pleasure can be dangerous, a subversive thing, a source of empowerment. One of the greatest historical elaborations, of course, is Blues Legacies and Black Feminism. Obviously, by Angela Davis, for those of you who don't know. Okay. But just to be clear, I'm not retreating from the visionary project of building a new society, but just want us to be mindful of what it means to be mindful, to think through crisis toward revolutionary possibility. Consider SNCC's Freedom Summer, because that's what we're also celebrating, 50 years. We've all heard about the endless meetings and the long, hard work of building participatory democracy. But as Barbara Ransby clearly demonstrates, those long meetings, right, were not simply about consensus building, but rather forms of knowledge production, okay? There were collective interrogations into the problem, because you can't just assume that everyone knows in the context of Jim Crow what the problem is. There are mechanisms that are not so visible that people have to figure out and how to fight that, right? They were trying to understand processes and mechanisms of racist control, of political economy, and patriarchy, which was playing itself out in the organizing work. So this was the genius of Ella Baker's radical democratic vision. SNCC members did not give a series of monologues. They were engaged in dialogue, which is something I wish my students would do more often. Because they get up there and they just talk. They have their thing they want to say, and then they sit down. I'm like, why don't you talk to each other? You know, that's hard work. Because to talk to each other means you have to listen, right? Okay? They were pushing each other's ideas to the limit. And there was also a level of transformation. So what happens in the end wasn't consensus building per se, but transformation. You come out the other end thinking differently than what you thought about before. That was the point of those. If I'm wrong, all the SNCC people tell me I'm wrong, correct me. But this is, to me, the genius of Barbara's book and why we have to go back to that as well.